In this video, I'm going to cover section 6.1, Understanding Percentages from Contemporary Mathematics by OpenStax. The learning objectives for this section are to be able to define and calculate percent, convert between percent, decimal, and fractional values, calculate the total percent or part, and solve application problems involving percents. To begin, we want to talk about, this concept of percentages and where we see this. So the amount budgeted for the National Park Service in the United States was less than 1/10 of 1%. So that's 1/10% of the total layouts in the budget. So this percent describes a specific number, understanding that ratios puts the $3.5 billion. So the budget for the National Park Service, which was $3.5 billion, was really only 1/10 of 1% of the entire U.S. budget, which is in the trillions. So the word percent comes from the Latin phrase percentum, which means by the hundred. So any percent is a number divided by 100. Changing a percent to a fraction, to do that, we would write the percent in its fractional form by writing the number, the percent value, over 100. So let's rewrite the following as a fraction. So here for number 1, we've got 18% in fractional form. That's 18 out of 100, which it's not written here on the slide, but as a reduced fraction, that reduces to 9 out of 50. So 18% is 18 out of 100, or 9 out of 50. And the same thing for 38.7%. That would be 38.7 divided by 100, which doesn't convert nicely to a just a simplified fraction, but this is actually equivalent to 387 divided by 1,000. But, just in its quote-unquote percent form, it's 38.7 divided by 100. So when any calculation with a percent is to be formed, the form of a percent must be changed. So you can't necessarily do a calculation using the percent form. You have to convert it to a decimal. And so to convert to a decimal, we divide the percent by 100. That's basically converting it to its decimal form. So to go from percent to decimal, we divide by 100. And then to go from decimal to percent, we multiply by 100. So it's kind of like undoing itself. So if I think about percent and decimal, to go from percent to decimal, we divide by 100. And then to go from decimal back to percent, we multiply by 100. So that's kind of a way to visualize it in that way. So convert the following from or two decimal forms. So for example, 17% to decimal form would be 17 divided by 100, which is 0.17. And so that's what they've written over here to kind of show you. And then in number 2, 7% to decimal would be taking 7 and dividing it by 100, and that's equal to 0.07. So a quick trick to do this is quite simple. We just take, for example, in number 1, 17%. We move the decimal place twice because it's here at the end, and drop the percent, so that's 0.17 as a decimal. And then 2, 7%, the decimal's at the end, move 2 places. We need a 0 placeholder in this case. And so that becomes 0.07 as a decimal. And we drop the percent once it's converted to its decimal form. Now, what about going from decimal to percent? Well, the book weight is 0.34 times 100%, and so that's going to be 34%. And for number 2, we've got 4.15 times 100%, which is going to give me 415%. So that would be multiplying. The same way we could do that using that little trick in the opposite direction. If we're going from decimal to percent, then we move the decimal place to the right, and that gives us 34%. And when we go from decimal to percent, we add in the percent symbol. And then for number 2, we've got 4.15. And so we're going to move the decimal place 2 places, so that's 415%. And so, this is a fraction of it. 34% is a fraction of a whole. As where 415% means we got more than we had, almost 4 times more. All right, so to calculate 25, let's look at how to calculate total percent or part. So to calculate 25% of 52, we multiply 52 by 25%. But again, we need to first convert percent to either its fractional form or to its decimal form. So there's some conversion issues there. So we have 0.25, that's 25% converted, times 52, and that equals 13. So 0.25 times 52 equals 13. So that means that 25% of 52 is 13. Not percent, just 13. All right. So 52 is called the total, or the base amount. 25 is the percentage, and 13 is the percent of 52, or sometimes called the part. So that's making up the part. It's a little, I think, wordy, but part is percent times total. That's the formula that the book is given. And the amount is percent times base. So these mean the same thing, just written in different ways. So if you have, for example, 35% or 45%, that's a part of something, that's a fraction of it. As we're like 415%, that's more than a part. You're getting more than you had. So let's look at this example. Determine 70% of 3,500. So 70% of 3,500. Let me write the word of. First thing we want to do is convert 70% to a decimal, so 0.7, and we're going to multiply that by 3,500. And so we can come over here and see the part 0.7, which was converted from 70%, times 3,500 is 2,450. So this is 2,450, and that's the part. This was the whole, right, or the base, and this was the percent of what you had. So let's look at a word problem. So Justine applies to a medium-sized university outside her hometown and finds out the retention rate, which is the percent of students who return their sophomore year for 2021 academic year at the university, was 74%. So in other words, what the retention rate tells us is that 74% of freshmen come back, is what it's saying. So during a visit to the registrar's office, she finds out that there are 1,350 people enrolled in the academic year. How many students from the academic year are returning for 2022 academic year based on this statistic? So basically we're saying, what is 84% of 1,350 people? So that's 0.84 times 1,350. And that gives us 1,134 students. So 1,134 students out of the 1,350 students will return based on this, information for the 2022 academic year. All right, so that's really all I have for this video, kind of short, sweet. There's plenty more in the textbook. So now it's your turn. You've watched the video. Now I need you to go read the book if you haven't done so already, and then practice. So read, write, and practice. You've watched this video, so go read the textbook. Try those your turn problems. Those are very helpful and important. And then after you're done, practice by heading over to the LMS and working on your online homework.